On May 21, 2026, Kurt Busch lost his younger brother, not a statistic, not a headline, not a 234-win NASCAR legend, but the kid from Las Vegas who had been there since the go-karts, the one person who understood him completely, the other half of the only sibling duo in NASCAR history where both brothers became Cup Series champions. Kyle "Rowdy" Busch was 41 years old. And for Kurt, the silence that followed was not the kind that fades. It was the kind that rewrites everything. Before the announcement. The days before May 21 were already frightening for the Busch family. There had been warning signs, a persistent cough, severe sinus issues that plagued Kyle during the Watkins Glen race, a radio call requesting medical assistance mid-competition. They were the kinds of things that competitive drivers push through, the kind of adversity that Kyle had bulldozed his entire career. Kurt held on to the belief that his brother's legendary resilience would carry him through this the way it had carried him through every crash and setback the sport had ever thrown at him. It didn't. The illness was severe pneumonia that progressed into sepsis, a diagnosis the family eventually shared publicly, not because explanation eases grief, but because a community that loved Kyle deserved the truth. The sepsis moved through a body built to survive 200 miles per hour impacts with a speed that stunned everyone, including the medical professionals treating him. Kurt watched the man he had always considered indestructible become fragile in a matter of hours, and then the phone call came that made everything permanent. Kurt looks at what they built together and understands that nothing in American motorsport quite replicated it. Two brothers from the same Las Vegas neighborhood, shaped by the same parents, driven by the same relentless refusal to lose, who grew up to win NASCAR Cup Series championships individually, making them one of only two sibling pairs in the sport's history to accomplish that. Their rivalry made both of them better. The mutual hunger to prove the Busch name belonged at the top pushed them toward achievements neither might have reached alone. Kyle's record, 63 Cup victories, 234 wins across all national series, will ensure his first ballot Hall of Fame induction, and Kurt knows that the day he watches his brother's name go up on that wall will be the most bittersweet moment he has ever experienced in a sport full of them. He had retired in 2023 after the lingering effects of concussions demanded it. Kyle was supposed to keep racing for years more. The Hall of Fame will memorialize what they achieved together, but it will never fill the space where the phone calls used to come, the debates about car setups, the strategic arguments that only two men who had both stood at the very top of this sport could truly have. What moved Kurt most in those final years was watching his brother become a father. Brexton, born in 2015 after Kyle and Samantha endured a miscarriage and multiple failed IVF treatments that brought their marriage to its breaking point, arrived carrying the full weight of everything they had fought through to get there. By 2024 the kid had nearly 50 racing victories across multiple disciplines, and watching him race his father for the first time in March 2025 gave Kurt a glimpse of what the next chapter of the Busch name in motorsport was going to look like. Lennox, born via surrogate in 2022, was the tiny peanut who completed them, the child who brought out a gentler version of the fiercest competitor Kurt had ever known. He saw it at the track, in the pit lane photos, in the way Kyle's entire bearing changed when she was in his arms. Richard Childress Racing has since reserved the number 8 for Brexton, and Kurt holds that decision close, not as a tribute, but as a promise that the story Kyle started is not finished being written. What breaks him most is the knowledge that Lennox will grow up knowing her father through stories and photographs rather than presence. Kurt understood Kyle's villain persona better than anyone, because he watched it get built from the inside. The aggression, the uncompromising line holding, the unapologetic intensity that made him one of the most polarizing drivers in NASCAR history, none of it was manufactured. It was the same competitive drive they had both inherited, turned up to a volume that the sport had rarely encountered. The fans who packed the grandstands to watch Kyle lose were, in Kurt's view, still fans, because nobody filled a seat quite like his brother. But the man Kurt is grieving is not the villain. It is the one who could spend hours talking engine specifications, who was fiercely loyal to the people he trusted, who defended Samantha's IVF advocacy as loudly as he defended his own racing lines, and who poured every ounce of that famous intensity into being a father and a husband when the helmet came off. The tributes arriving from drivers who raced against Kyle, many of whom spent years wanting to beat him more than anyone else on the grid, tell Kurt everything about the kind of respect his brother commanded even from those who never cheered for him. Kurt will spend the rest of his life telling the story of the kid from Las Vegas who grew up to own the track. He will tell it to Brexton, who carries the name and the fire and will one day put both into a Cup Series car. He will tell it to Lennox, who deserves to know every dimension of the man the world called Rowdy, but who was simply Dad to the two people who mattered most to him. He will tell it to Samantha, who had been Kyle's equal partner through every high and every brutal low, and who now carries the weight of a family that Kyle built with everything he had. The engines will keep running. The green flags will keep dropping. The sport Kyle Busch dominated for 2 decades will move forward the way sports always do, filling the silence with new rivalries and new champions. But Kurt knows that somewhere in the space between the roars, in the moment just after the field takes the green and before the first corner breaks the pack, there will always be a beat that belongs to his brother. The story of Kyle Busch did not end on May 21, 2026. It simply passed from the driver's seat into the hands of the people who loved him most. And Kurt Busch intends to make sure those hands never let it go.